Welcome to our 9th episode of SARCan, Canada's Volunteer Search and Rescue podcast. For Volunteer SAR, about Volunteer SAR, by Volunteer SAR, and brought to you by Axiom Mutual Insurance, keeping promises close to home. My name is Patrick Armstrong, and with me virtually is Spencer Whitelaw. How's it going, Spencer?
Great, Patrick. How are you?
Good. It's weird when we're not in the same building together doing this.
Yes and no, because for the listeners who obviously don't know because they can't see us, when we normally record, we do it from headquarters, but to avoid feedback and primarily having to look at each other, we just go to different parts of our headquarters. I'm sitting out in the open and Patrick is in a dark corner of our mobile command post. But we pop out every now and then like a groundhog and say hi to each other in between our guests. And on episode 7, we went out for breakfast too, which was a little bit too much intimate contact with you for my liking, but
I paid.
How that goes. You did pay, and I appreciate that. And I would have ordered way more if I had known that was going to happen. But I'm excited because I want to share with our listeners, because by the time this episode airs, your birthday will have come and gone, because your birthday is in 2 days from now, 3 days, something like that.
It's April 25th.
April 25th. Very good. And you are turning
50.
This is your 50th birthday coming up?
This is my 50th, yep.
That's so exciting, because next month is my 30th, and that just goes to show, again, the drastically different generations that you and I are.
No, but I'm in better shape, which is weird.
Better shape at 50 or just better shape than I am at 30? Probably both.
Probably both.
Yeah.
I have to say, 50 is the new kind of mid-age. I'm all right with that because my first 16 years, I had to grow and learn to speak. Like, I wasted them, really, my first 16 years. So think what I can accomplish the next 50.
Yeah, that's a scary thought here. And I grew up too fast, so I feel like I'm over 50. My body certainly feels like it's over 50. So that's interesting. I guess we're roughly the same life stage then, we'll call it. That doesn't feel right, but nevertheless.
You're an old soul.
Yeah. Speaking of years, though, we've got several guests on today. We must be floundering here because we just brought in a whole bunch of backup. We have 3 guests joining us, and on this very episode we have a combined 45 years of search and rescue experience, which I know for many of our experienced listeners will be like, I have 45 years and I'm one person. That's great, that's awesome, but it's pretty special for us too because we're new to this, and we've really enjoyed our first few years of search and rescue experience, and being able to bring on a lot of experienced, seasoned guests to share with us and our listeners their experience. So why not bring on a few of those members today as we talk about, drumroll, the Humanitarian Work Force. We have Paul French, the Program Director of SARVAC's Humanitarian Work Force. We have Scott Yan, SARVAC's Communication Officer based out of Squamish, BC. And returning to us from making his reprisal from episode 2 is our very own Jeff Fitchett, the rescue captain of the Special Operations Rescue Team of our very own HASAR. And again, a combined 45 years of experience. They have a lot to share. Stay tuned and hear what they have to say about the humanitarian workforce experiences they all share.
This episode is brought to you by Country Corners in Exeter, Ontario. Country Corners is a family-owned business that has been dealing with everything from motorcycles, ATVs, snowmobiles, and you may remember this, Spencer, our Argo was donated in part through Country Corners. They are absolutely wonderful to deal with. Scott is a huge supporter of HASAR, and we just want to give them a shout out for everything they've done for their community and for us. So thank you.
Absolutely. They have a lot of awesome toys, like our Argo. Welcome to episode 9 of SARCan. Thank you for joining us. We have a handful of wonderful, esteemed guests joining us today from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. On the East Coast in Atlantic Canada, Newfoundland, we have Paul French, SARVAC's Humanitarian Workforce Program Director. And all the way on the West Coast in BC from SARVAC, we have Scott Yan, the Communications Officer. And then, of course, joining us once again, we have our very own Jeff Fitchett, the Rescue Captain of the Special Operations Rescue Team of HASAR. Welcome to you all, and thank you for joining.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So SARVAC, for those who don't know, is Search and Rescue Volunteer Association of Canada. They are our national governing body that oversees each of these smaller associations in each province. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about the Humanitarian Work Force, which is a SARVAC-run initiative overseeing the implementation and use of resources in the search and rescue realm within Canada, whether it's on a local, provincial, or federal level, that's used to address mutual aid requirements for things such as natural disasters, pandemics. We had one of those not too long ago. And various other issues. So Paul and Scott are great resources that we're going to have speak about that today. Paul, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about SARVAC's work in the humanitarian workforce and your role as the program director of such.
So The Humanitarian Work Force program was initially implemented by Public Safety Canada, and that was, Spencer, you said it, in response to the global pandemic, COVID-19. So back in 2021, the Government of Canada, in an effort to provide surge capacity to regular humanitarian efforts that are supporting sort of initially the response to COVID-19 in Canada, started the Humanitarian Workforce Program. And initially, they reached out to 4 NGOs: the Canadian Red Cross, Salvation Army, St. John Ambulance, and the Search and Rescue Volunteer Association Canada, or SARVAC. And since then, just this last year, they've also included Team Rubicon Canada into the program as well. So, the initial project was only about 6 months long. It really focused on sort of the governance structure of sort of a national approach to humanitarian efforts or humanitarian response. Understanding that GSAR teams across this country, there's 300 of them, they've been providing these same efforts locally for as long as we all remember. This is not something new. The biggest change to this is now that we're taking a national focus and we're breaking down municipal, provincial, and territorial borders, and we're making one big team basically under the national GSAR organization, which is SARVAC. So with that, SARVAC is an association of associations. We have no governing authority over the GSAR teams or associations across the country. However, we're there to support and implement programs that supports the volunteers, the boots on the ground, we say. So first was the governance structure and the document, and I'll probably reference this a large amount of documents, Spencer, and I apologize throughout the podcast here, but again, I'll just flag the SARVAC HWF website, sarvac.hwf.ca. All these documents are there, but our first sort of cornerstone document was our Emergency Management Government Operations for Search and Rescue, or EMGOSAR. That really laid out the governance structure of what we were trying to do and what we were trying to build. So when municipalities or provinces and territories became overwhelmed and needed surge capacity, that we could step in with our volunteers who may not be local, who aren't affected, but because of our standardized training, have the same skills and capability, knowledge and training to be able to support the community or the affected area, we'll say. From there, we built out our National Search and Rescue Operations concept. So, and that was sort of our 10-phase concept of operations, really. So, phase 1, notification and assessment, right through demobilization and our after-action review, and talks about each of the phases that we go through for deployment, and breaks them down pretty clearly. That was really there was 2 major documents, but that was really our first phase. And like I said, it was about 6 months. It was a small team of 3 people, I believe. Over the last 4.5 years, we've since grown to a team of 10. Wasn't long into it. We had the deployment, for Deer Lake First Nation there in Northern Ontario, and it was a bit hectic, but it was also good to make sure that the documents and some of the guidance documents that we were putting together were functional, and that everything was operating the way it was supposed to.
When you're creating this and you're given, here's the mandate for 6 months, how did something like ICS, or here in Ontario we have IMS, how did that play into that? Was that a starting, or was that something you built around, or was it something you found useful or didn't?
The ICS or IMS component was a very initial thought. As soon as we started, as soon as we got through, actually, even in the development of the emergency management governance for our operations for search and rescue, I mean, that was, again, even at that, you're talking about span and control and ensuring you have the right people in the right places doing the right task. And because I don't know if it's still, we'll say, nationally adopted across the country, as you said, there's ICS and IMS. Now, again, they're very similar, but still have some different terminology. We had to make the decision to pick one. And we went with ICS at the time. I should say we're still there. But we chose ICS just because it was more prominent, not just in Canada, but also globally, really. But it's been a key cornerstone. And even today, there's some terminology that we use, such as a national incident support team or a mission incident support team or a response coordinator. But all of those are specifically derived from ICS. So a response coordinator in an organizational chart is no different than an incident commander. Just understanding that we don't have authority. When we respond to support municipalities, we are not the authority having the jurisdiction. ICS, I would say, is a backbone foundation and framework of what the SARVAC Humanitarian Workforce Program is derived from, right from our mission ready groups and our capabilities right to our command and general staff positions.
And Scott, as the communications officer, there's a humanitarian workforce and there's several different agencies involved, say HASAR, Team Rubicon, and what have you. Are you finding that you're doing a unified communications message and unified comms out, or is it something that's individual to the teams?
Yeah, and it's challenging for myself, familiarizing myself with other organizations. You brought up Team Rubicon, Salvation Army, like varying degrees of organizations that, we come from different backgrounds, somewhat different MOs, but more or less coming together to achieve a similar objective. So, in terms of boots on the ground and in terms of those more localized resources in perhaps an HWF operation, it's tough for me to speak from an operational perspective as I typically am not boots on the ground, if you will. So there is varying degrees of messaging that does get shared. And, a part of my role is kind of having the optics from various organizations and trying to see where teams are at or where organizations are at. If it's response to a wildfire evacuation, SAR teams very much have our MO and our certain roles when they have boots on the ground. So for sure, it does present a challenge in the consistency of what perhaps GSAR volunteers are responsible for in comparison to what volunteers or members with Team Rubicon might be responsible for.
That's fair. And speaking of boots on the ground, with Jeff on deck. Jeff, you've been boots on the ground with one of the first in Deer Lake, and I think organized chaos is going to be the order of the day no matter what you do. Planning's great until you step off the plane and the situation changes. You dealt with an evolving situation, and I think you did a great job and with the support of everything that SARVAC had. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, Paul and I worked kind of hand in hand along with Janelle for that deployment. And there's a Mike Tyson quote that I like, and everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And mine kind of started with my gear not arriving. So here I am with what I have in a backpack with some essentials, right? And you just make do and you roll with it. By the time we arrived in Deer Lake, the COVID outbreak had kind of subsided. There was only, I think, 3 people who had COVID and were isolated. The stores had just opened up, and I was the team lead on it, and that was the first national SARVAC deployment. So it was very interesting to the pre-planning. We were told that we might be sleeping in tents initially, and then SARVAC and Paul and Janelle and the team, they were able to line us up either a church or a school, and we just kind of rolled with it. And then we were expecting to be doing more COVID-related stuff. As a team lead, I was wanting to be effective and offer support for the community. So I spent a good deal of time over the first day trying to line up key players in Deer Lake First Nations. It was an interesting experience, to put it mildly.
What lessons, and Scott, jump in as well, what lessons were learned from Deer Lake? What worked? What did you go, that looked good on paper?
I would say there was a lot of lessons learned from the Deer Lake First Nations deployment. And one was having a national team sort of ready, trained, and available and sort of on deck to be able to handle any sort of deployment like that. And initially, that never existed. SARVAC did have a capacity building project at the time. Again, that was back when there was, I think, 3 people active in the program. And I know I was, although still working with SARVAC at the time, having nothing to do with the Humanitarian Workforce Program, I was brought on as the safety officer in the national support team at the time. So there was a lot of lessons. One big one was around logistics and sort of everything that goes with trying to get, a dozen people from all over. Everybody that deployed to Deer Lake First Nation, it was easiest just to take them right from Ontario. We had lots of volunteers stepping up to the plate. It was quite challenging trying to get everybody in the hub airports in Thunder Bay. Tim Wheeler sort of led the charge on the ground in Thunder Bay and putting together a menu and getting camp stoves, and because we were going self-contained. There was when the folks left on that plane, on that charter, to the best of our ability, they had everything they needed to sort of self-sustain themselves from a community that was in lockdown, we'll say, for lack of a better word. Logistics was a big one. A real big one for me was communications. And Jeff, you'll recall there was a point in time on the demobilization when we got a call in the office from the charter that said, our aircraft is at the airport, but your team is nowhere to be found. And it ended up just being a total miscommunication. But at the time, we were really worried about the team and what had happened and why they didn't make it to the airport. Deer Lake First Nation isn't a big town. Like, how could a team of a half a dozen, 6 or 8 folks get lost and not make it to the airport? And as I said, it turned out that it was just a miscommunication, but I could pretty much guarantee with the PACE communication program we have in place now, and PACE stands for Primary, Alternate, Contingent, and Emergency Forms of Communication. At any time, our volunteers should have 4 means of communications back to the MIS and the NIS. So I'm very hopeful and confident that that won't happen again. We'll know where our people are. We'll be able to track them, whether that's in Deer Lake First Nation or whether that's in Toronto. But, I do want to tip my hat to Jeff. He did lead that charge as a response coordinator before the term response coordinator was even created. And in any situation, the 5 of us here, we understand that there's a certain level of, time before you get that sort of operational rhythm underneath you. And I don't know how Jeff did it back then, but he had it right away. And as soon as he landed in Deer Lake, he was quick with his daily operational briefings and just sort of the process that they figured out on the ground and the communications back and forth. Even though the plans weren't fully vetted, the technologies weren't there, we've come a long way since there.
It's interesting, Paul. I'm sorry, can I jump in? Yeah, Paul, it was definitely interesting, to put it mildly. I was pretty surprised when we landed in Thunder Bay, and then to see what Thunder Bay SAR put together, sleeping bags, the amount of food, it was remarkable. And then the communications definitely were problematic. And I was thankful that we ended up in the school because we did have some internet that I was able to connect with you guys and give just feedback and stuff like that. So we all learned a ton. And I know with Huron Area Search and Rescue, we've started doing a frontier program and to train for deployments like that. And it was just some of the stuff that we experienced in Deer Lake that spearheaded our initiatives on our side.
Yeah, you both raise a lot of good points there about everything you've learned from your experiences. And I think the saying that you don't rise to the challenge or rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training. When it kind of hits the fan, everything goes sideways. You get off the plane hundreds of kilometers away from home, and all of a sudden your gear isn't with you, and you've got so many logistics to deal with, both from an independent standpoint of looking after your own stuff, and then Paul, you looking after it from a national level here too. The importance of being flexible, being able to adapt and overcome these challenges as they pop up spontaneously. You guys do a great job of that. And I trust that looking back and reflecting on all the trial and error of going through this relatively new program, you guys have learned a lot from your experiences. And Paul and Scott, I'm interested in your opinions on how you see the humanitarian workforce continuing to develop as a result of these experiences, where after each deployment, you gain more knowledge, more experience, and learn more from different challenges that have arose. How do you see the humanitarian workforce program continuing to develop as a result of these experiences?
It's kind of funny. Just thinking back on Deer Lake, it's almost like we've come such a long way from that point. I feel like for me and for a lot of people on the HWF team, that was a first. It was a first where we kind of got all these resources allocated and to see kind of where we're at now, and buzzwords such as communications and ways that we've kind of been able to perhaps like evolve in some capacity. Like I feel like there have been a lot of lessons learned. Fast forward to now, where we're using kind of a cloud-based work operating system such as Monday that, allows for us to kind of communicate more effectively with other volunteers and members of under the HWF umbrella. So to have tools as such, and to have training in the utilization of these tools that can enhance our ability to respond, I feel like it really shows where and how far we have come. Because I feel like initially in some of the first, and Deer Lake as an example, and for me nationally, as the comms officer, it's like at times like it's like, oh, like who's where, like where are the volunteers, where are these individuals, where are these who's responding. So I feel like the ability to enhance our ability to respond has been enhanced and will continue to enhance itself.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that you guys are able to keep moving forward and keep progressing. Paul, you said very early on that this was supposed to be a 6-month initiative, and in keeping with the theme of the pandemic, it's only supposed to last yay long, but has kind of continued on. I trust the Humanitarian Work Force isn't going anywhere and is going to continue to grow.
Right now, we're so I say the program has been 3 phases. So phase 1 was that initial 6 months. It ended up getting extended into phase 2, which lasted another year, and then finally phase 3 was an agreement for 3 years. So we're in our final year of funding. Academia tells us disasters are continuing to increase in severity and intensity and duration, right? Like this, they aren't going away, unfortunately. So we have to build better mechanisms to be able to respond to those. And who better to respond to these incidents than the folks that are local? They have the training, they have the standardized approach. We understand the command and control system. We're organized, and we have sort of those 9 key capabilities to be able to offer. As we sort of talked about, I mean, there was a lot of lessons learned since Deer Lake, and it wasn't that long ago, but I feel like it was ages ago. We've developed the team, we've developed the program, we've implemented after-action reviews. We've gone from folks like Jeff on an Excel spreadsheet to adopting ISRI, and now Monday.com, as these technologies advances and data management systems are available, and we're not just relying on one system now, but we have it backed up, so we have 2. So if one goes down, we just switch to the other. There's fail-safes put in place, but these formal after-action review processes has been really key for us in learning from our, I don't want to say mistakes, right? Because no one's making any mistakes there, but we're just we're learning lessons every time we respond, and no matter that's a deployment to Deer Lake First Nation with 8 people, or if it's 100 people going to Effective Impact 2024 that was held there in October. These we're learning lessons all the time. A big issue for us in getting volunteers to deploy and to trigger that deployment was the insurance coverage. Right across Canada, provinces and territories have different coverage for their volunteers. There was a gap between some. And so if Ontario volunteers, GSAR volunteers, respond to BC, they might not have workers' compensation. But if BC volunteers deploy to Ontario, they would have workers' compensation. So we had to define a stopgap measure, and it was really around the long-term disability piece, right? So SARVAC provides that blanket policy for commercial general and AD&D, or accidental death and dismemberment. The commercial general, the provinces and territories buy into it. The AD&D, SARVAC provides that, and we provide additional policies the commercial general for HASAR deployments. This policy doesn't exist anywhere in Canada by any organization. It had to be developed, and it was developed specifically for us. And it covers 3 pieces. It covers that AD&D piece. It covers a emergency medical travel piece, because we know provincial territorial borders, there are some differences in medical coverages. And if you are injured and having a loved one fly out and be able to stay with you and care for you and support you. And then the last piece was a weekly indemnity, so that if for some reason you were unable to continue your employment, that there would be a reimbursement or I should say funds provided to you. We know that volunteers are committing a lot on themselves, and to support the national program and also to support the individuals in need. and we want to be there to support the volunteers. And so I'm very pleased to have that policy in place and to be able to provide that assurance to the volunteers should anything happen, and God willing it won't, but should something happen, that coverage is there if they need it.
I think Paul brings up a pretty, important new word that I feel like is a part of the evolution of the HWF program, is support. And it's very easy for us to kind of get stuck up and talk about the response, and that's kind of like the main call to action, but to also speak to the mental wellness program and the Indigenous support, which is all under kind of the HWF initiative. These are key components of the program, in which we have some paid staff who are devoting a lot of time in developing these aspects of the program.
You both raised some awesome points there, and you made me think of the old adage that one of our founding HASAR members really drilled home when we were building this from the ground up. I say we, like I had anything to do with it when they were building it from the ground up. And that is that we're always looking for ways to build a better mousetrap. And I love hearing about after action reports, and not only SARVAC and HWF being able to learn stuff from their individual members from all across the nation on these deployments, but also as those individual members to learn something from these really unique experiences and bring them back to their individual teams all across Canada, and we can all learn together. And one of the things that we brought forward, as was mentioned earlier, was our frontier training that we facilitate at HASAR. And Jeff, you were a driving force in creating and facilitating the frontier training. What are some things that you learned from your HWF deployments that you've brought back and are helping other searchers learn to better equip them to learn from these experiences for when they do deploy on a humanitarian workforce operation?
That's an excellent question. It's where to start, really. First off is mental wellness. When you're sent to an isolated area and you're exposed to things that you don't normally see every day, certain people, it can really trigger them. And I think the support with mental health is imperative. I think certain skill sets, what we required out in Deer Lake was something as simple as having a chainsaw operator's license and being able to use it, how to kind of think on your feet and roll with punches and continue to be resilient and basically achieve what the mission is to help the community that's impacted and that needs assistance. Paul brought up just a ton of stuff there with logistics. And I think being able to show up and be effective, be prepared properly. And I think all the training with the frontier, winter survival, starting fires, like just basic things, working with others, communications, like all this stuff. There's just so much. It's hard to, in a short conversation, like touch on how much stuff transpired. I reviewed my notes from that deployment, and it took me almost a half hour to read through everything that I wrote back then and just reflect on it. And to see where we are now and where we came from, like Paul and Scott have both mentioned, SARVAC has grown immensely.
One of the things that you both touch on, Paul and Scott, that a lot of people don't think about, the behind the scenes. We're so used to, I guess, the Hollywood mentality. There's a disaster, let's go. That nobody sees the behind the scenes, all the planning, all the late nights that you and your team are doing just to get things like MOUs. And then you're dealing with municipality, you're dealing with a provincial, you're dealing with federal, you're dealing with different departments, you might be dealing with different bands. There's all sorts of permissions, MOUs, and in some cases probably writing MOUs on the fly. And so what seems like we got to go, this is an emergency, let's get there, you're inventing things as you go, and suddenly it becomes 3-4 days before you can get somebody there. But all those things have to be in place. And Paul, you bring up such great things about the protection of the volunteers. Everybody wants to help, but how do we protect those members? How do we protect them from harm? What happens when they go? They see something that they've never seen before. They get hurt. Without those MOUs, without those policies that you and your team are creating, as much as and I'm very ADHD. Let's go. We'll sort out everything once we're there. But that's not the reality of it. So I think you bring up so much, and you all need to be commended. Scott, Paul, your whole team needs to be commended. Yes, things don't move as fast as everybody would like because you're doing it right, and you've got all those levels to go through.
Logistics wins wars, right? Logistics are so important in all the background support. You don't get all the glory. It's the people typically with boots on the ground, right, that the stories come from. But without that backing, we wouldn't have even arrived in Deer Lake. And though it was modest deployment at that point, it's where it is now, and all the stuff there's a buzz going on in Canada as it pertains to the humanitarian workforce.
And Paul, you were going to say?
Yeah, great points, guys. I just sort of want to build off some of them, right? And to Jeff's point, you know what? We're building a lot of traction. It's taken a while. Public Safety launched this Humanitarian Workforce program. SARVAC adopted the SARVAC HWF. And what is it? And it's not just GSAR volunteers. It's not just associations. It's the municipalities, the provinces, and territories. They want to know more about it. How do we access it? What is SARVAC, and how is that different from our provincial and territorial associations? Just, trying to bring awareness around the fact that we're not any different. We're just a bigger group. Like it exists elsewhere, and we can provide additional capacity to what you already have. And so it's it's been a challenge to raise that awareness, and I would say internally and externally, right? But as you say, Patrick, there's a lot of work going on in the background, and I will give kudos to the SARVAC HWF team, no doubt. However, of our work, half of it wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the volunteers supporting us. Right from the initial advisory group that supported the three folks initially, the project team. There was actually an advisory group of individuals from across the country that were supporting that group of people and giving guidance and whatnot. To today, we have the group of champions. There's right now we're hosting our last champions workshop in May. Patrick, you say the ADHD, it's that type A personalities, right? We want to go, we want to help, we want to do what we can do, and we've had to change our processes, honestly, because GSAR folks are so eager. When we put out a call, we have a potential deployment. When are we going? There's folks that already got their bag packed, and it's like they're just waiting for that email to come to say go, right? Because they want to go to the airport or get in their car and start driving. Understanding that our SARVAC Humanitarian Workforce program is more of a surge capacity. It's not a first response trigger. And again, the design of emergency management in Canada is that the local resources have to be exhausted first before they call on provincial or territorial and or national level resources. Typically, when we get a deployment, our deployment to Labrador, and I will say that was a relatively fast deployment. We were just, that far. They evacuated the community on the 12th of July, if my memory serves me correctly. On the 17th, we had national folks on the ground. The local GSAR teams were used on the 12th, and they supported the event until we had some more folks come in. But that was fast, but it was still 5 days, right? So it takes time to get these agreements in place, to make sure the insurance and protection is in place, to get the logistics figured out so that we're not throwing people in, to the woods and just saying, figure it out, right? It takes time to coordinate all that stuff. And, no different than the Deer Lake First Nation deployment. We had 8 people on the ground, but there was a dozen, if not more, just as committed behind a computer screen or in a local grocery store picking up groceries or doing whatever to support the people on the ground.
That's true.
And I appreciate that you called my type A personality a positive thing. See, Spencer?
Yeah. Coming from a type B, thanks for doing that, because I wouldn't be able to. That's truly amazing here, from organizing MOUs to wielding chainsaws in the woods and everything in between. The amount of work that goes on behind the scenes to be able to make these humanitarian workforce deployments a possibility is truly amazing and spectacular. And I appreciate everything that you and your respective teams and associations have done to make that happen. I truly think it's a positive for the people of Canada to be able to have those resources available. This leads me to kind of our last wrap-up question of the podcast. Time has really flown by with everything that you've shared. Scott, we'll start with you. What is the reason that you got into search and rescue in the first place, and what's keeping you here all this time?
That's a good question. Initially my work with search and rescue kind of stemmed from working more on the prevention side. So a lot of people outside of the HWF program, a lot of people might not know that a lot of search and rescue is also trying to prevent incidents from happening before they happen. And so, for me, that stemmed through working as an outreach educator with the Adventure Smart program based here in BC. And that would be the kind of awareness messaging devoted to informing, getting informed, and still like going outdoors and more or less reducing the frequency, severity, and duration of SAR calls, and a more kind of communications, content, social media role. And it is a very rewarding job in the sense that the way I put it is that search and rescue, it's like fashion. It never sleeps. It just evolves. There's always something happening. There's call-outs in any part of the country, in any of our 13 provinces or territories at any point in the day. So to know that there is a way that I can contribute in that sense, it's super rewarding for me.
Awesome. And we got our Adventure Smart plug-in for the show, which is awesome because prevention is our purpose. Love Adventure Smart, and it's what keeps me in search and rescue too, is being able to facilitate those. Like we said earlier in the episode, there's so many different silos in search and rescue, so really finding your niche and what you're good at and enjoy is awesome. So it's nice to talk to another Adventure Smart fan, and I'm glad you found your way into the Humanitarian Work Force as well too, being the communications officer. So thank you. Paul, what got you into search and rescue, and why are you still sticking around? You've been here quite some time.
Yeah, I don't know if you could get rid of me if you tried, Spencer, honestly. I joined Search and Rescue just over 17 years ago. I'm located. Our Search and Rescue program was actually developed from the local EMO, or Emergency Measures Organization. When they did the first pilot about 55 years ago, they took a bunch of soldier scouts. For those in the scouting movement know, are termed as rovers, and that's where they done the first pilot project for search and rescue. Is they said, well, this group of young folk know all about surviving and navigating and communicating. So let's take these guys as our pilot project. There in term lie the name or the title for our local team, or my local team, which is Rover Search and Rescue. I was a long time. If you asked me 20 years ago, what do you want to do with your rest of your life? And I said, I want to be involved with search and rescue, but there's no paid positions. Eventually, I in 2015, I actually started my career in search and rescue with SARVAC under their prevention file. First got involved with revamping the Hug a Tree and Survive video back in 2015. Ran a bunch of other initiatives with website and creating the app and developing the Adventure Smart Coordinators, Assistant Coordinators Network, and supporting them to support prevention. I got a huge, deep place in my heart for prevention. Anybody who knows me knows that. But the reason I got involved with search and rescue in the first place was response. So when the opportunity came about to join the Humanitarian Work Force team and to sort of continue to lead the development of that in phase 3, I was super excited. And honestly, it's what gets me up in the morning, and it's it keeps me going all day long. Is when you truly love what you do. It's I'm very fortunate.
That's awesome. And Jeff, we covered off in episode 2 what got you into SAR. I'm glad to see that you've stuck around at least 7 more SARCan episodes. We'll check in with you on episode 16 to make sure you're still around and a part of the team. We're happy to have you, and we appreciate everything you continue to do for HASAR and your Humanitarian Work Force deployments and everything you do inside and out of search and rescue and facilitating our teams and other teams' rope training. Thank you for everything that you do and continue to do in search and rescue.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Folks, could I throw a bouquet out to you and the SARCan group, Patrick and Spencer, for what you guys are doing here for Search and Rescue in Canada? I think it's amazing. Really thoroughly enjoy your episodes, your content. I hope we can do what we can do to promote your podcast and what you're doing here. But the conversations from the beginnings to the Search and Rescue in Canada, prevention and training information, the episode with Dr. Popsicle and whatnot, I think that's really great that you guys are taking that on. I know it's a lot of work, kudos to you and hats off. And thanks again for welcoming us onto the show and sort of sharing some of our information. Again, look forward to maybe future conversations, but again, thank you to you both for what you bring to the table for SAR in Canada.
I appreciate that. Spencer and I actually don't like each other. That's why we tend to be separate. Today we're doing virtual from different homes, his house, and I'm in mine because we can only stand so much of each other. But no, we really appreciate that. And we're going to be at SARCan. Somebody thought it would be a good idea for us to host a podcast live.
Yeah, clearly they don't know how much editing goes on in the background. Yeah, this will be a lot of trial and error, and it'll either be great success for us, or we'll be canceled forthwith. And we'll just wait and see. We'll see what the bets are.
Yes, thank you all for being here. We truly appreciate it, and we look forward to more episodes highlighting SARVAC and everything that you guys are doing.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Another great episode, Spencer. Our next one will be our 10th, which is crazy. And you got a ton of shout out. Like, you're starting to stack the guests for Adventure Smart, I notice.
I am letting it sway a little bit in my corner. There's only so much that I know about search and rescue, and Adventure Smart is my bread and butter, and I love it. And as you heard Scott talk about in our episode here about prevention being our purpose, the thing is, with preventative measures, there's no way to quantify just how many search and rescue events are prevented by these proactive initiatives. So we'll never be able to get the stats on just how much of a difference these public outreach programs are making. So therefore, I think it deserves a little bit more attention to know, hey, this is out there, and a search prevented is much better than a successful search. It doesn't put anybody else in any danger or risk. So I totally promote Adventure Smart. With the warmer weather coming, I know locally we're starting to see a lot more presentation requests, and we keep venturing a little bit further outside of our area where we do our presentations, and then word of mouth travels, and then another organization that's just a little bit further from that place is also requesting one. Before you know it, we're pushing and we're spreading wider and wider and getting the great word of Adventure Smart out there. So yes, I'm going to do the plug whenever I can.
You're always very humble when it comes to this. How many children have you taught Adventure Smart?
I mean, numbers are kind of all over the place, and shout out to Kathleen O'Brien for staying on top of our Adventure Smart presenters across Ontario to stay up to date with our reporting on our numbers. HASAR, not just me, we've got a few awesome presenters, very qualified, very skilled. In our team, we've taught a little over 3,500 children in the since we started, which is about 7 years ago. No, 6 years ago. Yeah, 2019 is when we started.
And so 3,000 of those would be children that you have taught.
In that ballpark. And then the parents too. It's super important that the word gets out to parents as well too, because I know if I can barely remember anything because I'm so scatterbrained, I'm sure the 6-year-old I'm talking to is probably going to fall into the same realm. So we encourage parents to come and join the presentations as well too. There's a lot for them to learn. It's a great overall experience for the whole family. So it's a good time.
I just want it known that over 3,000 children have been taught prevention because of you. About as close as I will get to a compliment.
I'll take it then. Thank you for listening to SARCan, Canada's volunteer search and rescue podcast, brought to you by Axiom Mutual Insurance, keeping promises close to home. SARCan is pre-recorded and produced by the Huron Area Search and Rescue and is edited by Bad Puppy Productions.
SARCan is driven by your suggestions and comments. In fact, this entire episode was brought forth by SARVAC. There's a lot of SARs going on. We love your suggestions. We thank everybody who's contributed. So if you have an idea for a topic, you want to highlight your SAR unit or give a shout out to a member of your team, contact us at sarcan@hasar.ca. We're now on YouTube with the hopes that we can get some subtitles so that we're not forgetting our Quebec and New Brunswick teams and supporters. And of course, Hey Communications is a huge part of this whole thing. SARCan, for Volunteer SAR, about Volunteer SAR, by Volunteer SAR. And on behalf of Spencer and I, we thank you for listening and thank all the SAR volunteers out there for everything that you do for your communities, and please be safe. And I'm going to try a new ending line here.
Go for it.
Edward R. Murrow, good night and good luck.
I like that because whenever I leave work for the day, much to the annoyance of my coworkers, I play the goodbye song from Bear in the Big Blue House. It's wonderful, and I'm not going to sing it because I want to keep our listeners' viewership up. But listen to it, Bear in the Big Blue House, the goodbye song. And that's what plays in my head when we wrap this episode up.
Oh, I generally play Goodbye, My Lover, just so that my co-workers will always remember me when I walk out the door.
That's great.